Okay, we are live. Welcome, everybody. I'm Mathew McQueeny from Konabos. I am coming to you here with Kamruz Jaman, founding partner and solution architect at Konabos. He is also a newly minted 11-time Sitecore MVP. Today, we will be talking to you about one of Sitecore's newest and composable products, Sitecore Connect. So, Cam, I think when we were coming on here, we were kind of making the point that this product, which we will get a lot deeper into, is both made possible and necessary in some ways by the composable marketplace we are now living in right now and perpetually kind of shifting towards from more of a monolithic way of thinking. So let's go right into it. Could you just talk us through a little bit, Cam, and introduce Sitecore's overall current offering briefly from the all-in-one monolithic kind of way of thinking towards the next generation composable DXP?
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. And good to speak with you again. And congratulations on being awarded your first Sitecore MVP. I know you're super excited and getting into the depths of the world of Sitecore MVP and the background knowledge that we gain. So going into Sitecore's offerings, so we were at Sitecore Symposium last year in Chicago. I know we did a talk about this already, which we have shared with the community. So Sitecore is currently in kind of two camps, right? So you have your traditional all-in-one systems, the platform DXP, which you can install on-prem like you do right now, and you can control all and manage all aspects of that platform yourself. And then the next generation composable DXP offering SaaS services that we're all coming to love and becoming a major part of our lives. It promotes a different way of working. The composability is great because you can pick just the parts of the systems that you want. The downside to the composability, of course, is you have multiple different systems and you don't want to end up in a situation where each of those systems are working in silos. This was one of the touted benefits of the platform DXP. By bringing everything into a single platform, everything can work together and harmoniously as one system. The downside, of course, to that was it was touted as being like seamless integration, but that integration we found wasn't as seamless as it should have been, and it was more complex due to inherit and due to code base, which was not as flexible as it could have been. So this is one of the benefits of headless. We use APIs, we use webhooks and other open systems. So even though we are working with separate systems, we are actually now opening up a more integrated, allowing us to be more integrated and open with other systems that we will be working with.
Now, when on this slide, there was something that just occurred to me. When we see the word private cloud, does that mean that there is still some composability within the platform DXP?
So private cloud just means in your own subscription, right? So I could be hosting in Microsoft Azure, and it technically is in the cloud, right? So, but it's in my subscription. I own and control every aspect of that. Does it allow composability? Yes, it does. We could, like one of our paths for going fully composable, fully SaaS is to, especially if you're an existing Sitecore customer, is to continue to run on the Sitecore XM platform and then start to build in those other composable aspects to your solution, and then over time transition across to a fully SaaS model if that is what your business is aiming towards, and if that fits with your business models and your business practices. So with Sitecore 10.3, for example, even on the on-prem, the all-in-one platform DXP, there has been some updates and some changes which will allow better integrations with the composable model. So, for example, they added a layer which would allow webhooks and API integration for parts of the management of of your solution. So that might be like creating some new items due to an import, or triggering a publish, or triggering a reindex, all via webhooks and APIs, rather than having to write extra code and extra layers of code to integrate with Sitecore to do that. We have been able to do a lot of this in the past, even with traditional Sitecore. It just meant a lot of extra custom code rather than using APIs and systems built into the platform already.
Got it. And so when we're looking at this as we walk into the composable DXP part, they have broken down into three parts: Content Cloud, Engagement Cloud, and Commerce Cloud. And several of these products were announced at Sitecore Symposium. So could you kind of talk through this screen a little bit as we go directly into Sitecore Connect, but also how Sitecore Connect kind of ties in with this constellation?
Yes, absolutely. So again, we discussed this kind of matrix of products in one of our previous talks after Symposium, and Sitecore's handily broken it down, as you said, into three parts. These three areas largely cover what was in the existing XP platform. So if you're migrating across, these would roughly map across to existing functionality, not necessarily one-to-one, but roughly. And you'd probably want to reevaluate if which one of these systems you are currently using in your XP platform anyway, which one of these might be a substitute for another platform, or another platform might be a substitute for one of these parts. So the purple section along the bottom of those hexagons is a content cloud. So that's talking about your XM, your content hub, the new content hub 1, which is like the lightweight headless CMS that they've introduced. And obviously there's some search aspects to that as well, like content search. The teal in the top right is the Commerce Cloud. So Order Cloud being a replacement for Sitecore Commerce. This is fully SaaS, has all the benefits of the scalability, upgradability, everything else. And then Discover, which kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with the search part, but Discover is focused more on search and recommendations around commerce and products rather than searchability of content itself. And then the red parts is the engagement cloud. So personalized for personalization, which was one of the strong points of Sitecore XP. CDP for customer data, the analytics and the profile part of XP, and then Send, which is the rebranded Moose Send product for sending emails. And then Connect is what we're going to be talking about now, which is Sitecore's new powerful integration workbench to help enterprise customers connect Sitecore and other platform solutions together. It started as iPaaS, so integration platform as a service. It's fully SaaS, as you would imagine, and this will allow different systems to integrate with each other with a low code, no code kind of solution. Lots of easy drag drop features, lots of predefined and built up connectors and workflows and actions between the different systems, so you're not having to go and customize every single aspect of your integrations.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was looking at this, even though I've seen this slide many times over the last couple of months, but I was thinking of the monolithic way having all of these services, or the ability to have all these services within one, was almost like Pangea, when it was one Earth and then it broke apart. But now, the world kind of connects it all. And I think what you're saying there with the Connect is that if a customer were to have every one of these solutions in their stack, Connect can essentially surface up different actions. I think triggers is a word we'll get into, that are available in any one of these solutions to talk to actions in other solutions, whereas the monolith was supposed to do that. And I think that can help kind of describe why that might have been a difficult thing to do, right? To have an entire system. I mean, everyone wants to give a monolithic thinking a hard time, but that's really hard to make all those things connect in a clean way, right?
Absolutely, but that was a lot of the reasons why people were moving towards a monolithic way of these systems. You wanted something that was fully integrated. So if a customer performed an action on clicking an email, I wanted that to come through and figure that out on my website, on my commerce, to make the recommendations. So that fully integrated system was always everyone's end dream. The problem was it didn't live up to its expectations. It was too difficult to go in and customize the bits that you needed to customize. You thought all the data was in one system, so it should just be easy to look up one data from here to here. But there was so much, the code was very complex. Bringing that, customizing, enhancing, building on top of that wasn't as open as it should have been. And that was, I think, the major sticking point, where we thought it was in one system, therefore it will be extremely easy to get these silos to talk to each other. But by being this closed code base with sometimes poor documentation, it would have been better if it was a separate system with an open kind of API documented first approach, where by allowing other systems to talk to it, you have to open that data up, which then means any data that you're then consuming is just as easily available. So I think that's where we've ended up. And then now we're at the point where you have these separate systems. They are separate and they are siloed, but they have these open connections available to them. But how do you make how do you use these open connections without then going and adding a whole bunch of extra custom code in there, which you then have to maintain and keep up to date and possibly scale and everything else that goes with having these large enterprise solutions.
And that is a very good segue into, let's get a little dug in here on Sitecore Connect itself. So these are some of the materials that you'll find on this, but we'll talk to them. We've talked to what Sitecore Connect is in that constellation, but can you dig a little deeper into the actual product itself and some of the main features and updates that come with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sitecore Connect itself is a new offering from Sitecore, but it's not a new product, and it's also not from Sitecore in the back end. It's a white label system from an iPaaS system, an integration system called Workato, so WORKOTO. It's a well-established enterprise iPaaS system. They have, as you can see, over 5,000 connections out of the box. So just looking through a bunch of the systems, things like Salesforce, Marketo already have built-in integrations. HubSpot was a bunch with a few others, MailChimp, for example. And this will allow for automation of a whole bunch of your marketing and even some of your technical tasks in the background. They allow a low-code, no-code solution that you could just go into this system, pick a system that's going to kick off your workflow, your trigger system, and then it can create a bunch of actions, and they already have actions and tasks, and they already have a bunch of these built into this system. So you can essentially just go in, connect to your instance of Salesforce, for example, and then start to drag and drop in a bunch of actions that should be performed. And if you want to create these custom workflows, you can. They have a whole bunch of existing what they call recipes. So some of these are built by Waikato. Some of these are built by a wider community of repeatable tasks that they have had to perform. So you can just pick one of these recipes and just take the work that somebody else has already done to define a workflow, customize it, or remove some bits, or add in whatever other pieces you need, and save it and off you go. I haven't had to write any code. I haven't had to spin up any new infrastructure. I haven't had to host anything in my private cloud either. So.
Yeah, and I think you see the word on the last bullet there, workbench. That's often what you hear with these solutions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sitecore touts it as the integration workbench for your composable future. So it's having, I guess, in your own garage, right? The workbench is where you take all the separate parts, and that's where you integrate everything together to end up with your end products of whatever you want to build. So Sitecore's spin on this Waikato is an existing product, but what Sitecore will do with Connect is add in a bunch of their own recipes to connect all the Sitecore products together, both with themselves, but also with the wider set of connectors that are already available in that Waikato workspace. So, connecting up your XM cloud with your CDP, with your order cloud, with your Sitecore Send, right? These are all things that you'll want to have integrations with. So if somebody places an order on order cloud, you would want, you could maybe kick off a trigger that will then connect up and send an email via Sitecore Send.
Yeah, and I think a lot of innovation can come from these at times too. And that's a big part with community, which I know Sitecore is very big in community as it is, but you can create recipes that others can often piggyback on, right? Sitecore will create some. It's really like in some ways it makes me feel a little like an app store too, right? Like there are these solutions that have kind of been vetted to be allowed in there. You have the solutions that are part of Sitecore, which are going to be obviously front and center, but you have the access to any of the other solutions that you might be using in a composable mix. And I think another word here that you see a lot of is visualize. That's often a key word you hear in a lot of this headless composable visual editors. Some other solutions have different words for that, but that's another kind of anti-code thing, right? Like the low code, no code visualization is a big part of that, right? I mean, you hear that a lot in this marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives the marketers and the end users the control to be able to go in and create these workflows and these recipes and update them, right? Because no workflow is going to be the perfect workflow the first time you do it. But the last thing you want to do is then have another developer need to come in to make these changes. So by having these visual editors, you can go in and easily make tweaks and changes and update them as you see your requirements change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cam, as someone who's actually touched quite a bit of code, what do you feel when you see these solutions? What does it? I mean, it makes it easier, right? But I've been thinking often, what do you code?
There's always going to be some code, right? So
yeah.
For the most part, if you can do this without doing any coding, that's going to be great, because it means if there's an update, the updates will just happen automatically. If your system has some additional requirements, or you have some internal system, for example, that isn't quite, it isn't a SaaS solution itself, or doesn't quite have those open APIs that you need, at least I can go and create a little custom thing that will go and do that task for me. So it still gives me the flexibility of requiring, when I need that customization, because my business processes aren't exactly where they want it to be today. But again, once I've done that, I can switch that out for a different system in the future once that upgrade or process has changed. From a developer's point of view, I know sometimes people are like, well, you're not coding anything anymore. Well, what are you going to be doing? So, well, there's usually a million other things that we have to do. This just frees us up to concentrate on those other higher value items that we haven't been able to get to because, we're having to write custom code for things we really shouldn't have to write custom code for to begin with.
Yeah, and I have to imagine that knowing code makes working with these systems even more seamless for you.
Yeah. Sometimes yes, but sometimes the business processes are more important than the code. So I think that's, again, concentrate on those business processes and how to make those easier and how to make those better integrated with the lives of the people actually using the system, rather than worrying about little bits of code.
Gotcha. So just pulled up this slide. You've talked about the fact that Sitecore Connect is essentially using Workato as a basis, adding its own flair atop that. But here's a screen of Workato. So this is potentially what a customer, a developer would be interfacing with as they start to work with Sitecore Connect, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. So yeah, we have a handful of things that you'll come, that will appear very natural to you. All these different solutions that are in this one, and I think we're talking people who have worked with. I might have the name wrong, saying it Zapier or Zapier, and then way back when to if this then that was another solution where some of this stuff was happening. And I remember when If This Then That came out, it felt like, oh, this is a cool little thing, but I don't understand why it's absolutely needed. And it's funny how now, solutions like this have really moved up into a world where they're quite needed.
Mm-hmm. And I saw a video the other day. It's actually released by Sitecore, where they were demoing Sitecore Connect with Chat GPT. I know that's huge at that moment. It's everywhere, right? But it was using Chat GPT as part of that workflow process. And so all of a sudden it's like, actually, why not? I can easily integrate that as a step in my workflow because somebody just needs to build a connector for it or a step for it, and totally I can integrate with any other service that is available and has those APIs there.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. The things that you don't have to do as much of now, when you were talking about the coding aspect, might have been considered in some ways a perspiration, right? But now that you don't have to do those as often, there's more room for inspiration. And so you can create a lot of these novel innovations, connections that before you just wouldn't have had. You would have had to build up the base to even be able to think on top of it, right? Now you have all of these. It's almost like what we said when Amazon Web Services initially came out, that people could start companies that couldn't have before because of the amount of capital or resource intensity they'd have to put into building up their own on-premise, servers and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's where a lot of this comes into play. Now, we had put this slide in here. If there's any elements in here that we want to hit on, especially maybe with the serverless operation and maximum security, because I have started to hear some things with APIs that as everybody does APIs, does the sprawl in terms of security become unmanageable somehow, down the road when everybody's doing it? So I don't know if you want to speak to those in particular, serverless and maximum security.
Yep. So again, this is a SaaS-based system. So you don't have to worry about the infrastructure, the hosting, or the scaling. So in the background, Workato is running serverless. So the scaling will just happen automatically. If you are running a lot of operations, and they will scale that for you automatically, but equally, you will obviously get charged for that, right? Because that's how they'll be charging on an operation basis. You don't have to worry about things like redundancies, geoscaling, and you don't need to worry about any of the DevOps processes. They will handle all of that. In terms of security, again, the Workato team and Sitecore by proxy is responsible for the security. They will have teams and teams of people who handle all the security of your data and all the data governance that goes with it. Again, we already mentioned that the no coding required, but things like error handling, automatic error handling, if something goes wrong, all of that kind of thing will be automatically handled for them. Again, this is just part of the kind of standard kind of things what we have come to expect from SaaS and SaaS-based systems. We expect it to be automatically scaled and geo redundant, and security to be taken care of for us, as well as things like upgrades as well.
Yeah, Sitecore had an interesting statistic here, which we don't have to talk on a lot, but I think it just speaks to what having this kind of platform in place can allow you to get to focusing on your customers and the work and actually getting to market. So it said over 77% of Workato clients go live with their first automation within 1 week of account setup. Those are pretty impressive timelines, I'd say, especially with someone like you goes back with upgrade projects and big on-prem Sitecore installations.
Yeah, and given the breadth of the community available recipes and community recipes, I can see how that happens.
Absolutely. So we see this word triggers come up, and then it says triggers determine what event to listen to. Is this kind of the typical way that you might set one of these up in this screen that we're looking at here?
Yeah, exactly. So the trigger is what causes this workflow to start. So, and it could be, say it's polled, it's looking at a system based on, did something happen, did something happen, did something happen? Or another system may call in to your workflow and say, hey, I've just done this, go and do something. Or it might be a scheduled task to say, run this once a day, run this once a week. So, the trigger is just, what kicks off this workflow event.
Got it. Now we'll see things like dispatch, whether single batch and then, an event type. But this is probably the extent of what you will have to quote unquote program to reach that, the state of, like we saw in that last slide, to have something up and running pretty quickly once those systems are
but even
connected.
The programming even the trigger mechanism, for example, isn't something you'd necessarily need to program if your system is a good mark-based system, for example, right? So if you have an API-driven system, then if I'm polling something, I'm probably just polling an API endpoint to say, do you have anything for me? Whereas a real-time instance might be a trigger on the other system. So if I'm on Sitecore XM Cloud, for example, and I've just published the site, right? So I could trigger an event saying, hey, the site's just been published, push that into Sitecore Connect. The real-time trigger would pick it up saying, oh, they just published something. I have to go and do something. And maybe that something is just, hey, go and send an email to this team to say the content has just been published, or go and connect to Sitecore Search and tell it to reindex the website because the content's been updated. So even the trigger itself isn't necessarily something you need to program, and even the actions itself, depending on the system, might not be something that you even need to program. It's just could well just be configuration points at that stage.
Now, would you imagine a case, and maybe this is done in another system, but let's say you're a news website and you're using something like Content Hub One or a headless CMS to deliver that news. Would a system like this have do caching, or would caching happen somewhere else? So like when you release it and you want the page, the news page or the category page that article will appear on, I feel like sometimes you have to break the cache so that can appear on that page. Would caching potentially happen here too? Does that happen somewhere else?
You could, I guess, in theory, use this to break the cache. You wouldn't necessarily cache here at this point, right? But you could use this system to actually go and break the cache. So I could, for example, if I'm using a headless CMS or something, I could say, hey, I've just published a bunch of news articles. I need to break the cache on the news listing page. If I had a custom content delivery network, for example, that I was using, I could then use Connect to go and tell that that CDN of mine to clear the cache for that listing page. And then, as the users come in for the next time, it would go and do whatever it does in the background. So, yeah, potentially this is something that you could use as a trigger, as Mechanism says, as the glue in the middle to do that without having to write additional bits of code.
Yeah, I'm very interested in how teams will work together, right? Because the composable is supposed to really open things up for marketers and then for technologists and marketers to work together better, business users. And I wonder, will they have meetings that just go over triggers, right? And brainstorming things like that. So it'll be cool to see the human side of this too.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we've seen with our work in the composable space that that collaboration is key. And as we start to go and work in separate systems, they all still do need to work together, and they still need to be integrated. And the only way you get that integration and that flow working well between the teams is collaboration. So in a way, these headless and composable systems are breaking the systems apart that we spent so long bringing together into a single space. But equally, you need things like this Connect to bring the systems together, but somehow those humans still need to be brought together and be working together. And we know from our experience that collaboration is a key to any success.
Absolutely. And I think our last slide here, before we close things up a bit, is just an example of a flow builder. This is kind of the workbench itself showing one of these triggers set up already, right?
Yeah, and this was from the community library, so it wasn't even something that I had built myself. It was just a readily available recipe that you can bring in, and they have examples, and I'll call these examples because it may not be doing exactly what you want, but probably 80% of the times it will do. Most people's workflows are fairly similar in reality, but at least you can go and look at lots of different examples, see what they're doing. Some are more complex than others. You can see where you have, for example, the split in the logic there with a yes/no branch. You can have several of these cascade off if you want to make it quite complex. And then obviously you can go ahead and build some custom ones using something like Azure Functions if you need to go and do something a little bit more tricky, or maybe working with an internal system.
Great. And this is a bit of an advertisement, I guess, but I like the slide with the clouds. But just this is kind of the brand promise: integrate without customization. I always like the word configuration over customization, and that really this is in what we're seeing in the marketplace. This is a kind of product that can recompose what you might have been used to in a monolithic system, but in a way that's more scalable and has less chances to go wrong. Even though nothing goes wrong anymore, everything will go fine. But I would say, as our last thing, we're always happy to take any feedback from even anyone watching this live, and as well as here's our information to contact us. Cam, somebody who is coming across this product, how would you kind of recommend they move forward? Maybe if most of the customers are going to be coming from the all-in-one systems, right? Is there a best way to kind of dip your toes into this, or what do you recommend for looking at this and assessing this product other than talking to us, of course?
I think it's really going to depend on where you're coming from, the kind of integrations you had in your previous solution, and is this going to be the best solution for you? How deep do you need to go into this kind of integration? How sometimes people are working with already existing systems and they don't really have a choice. It will require a big re-implementation to move it completely to this kind of iPaaS system. Other times you're kind of breaking things apart anyway, and this is kind of the next evolutionary step. So I think take an assessment, see where you are, see where you want to get to, see how big a part iPaaS will play for your organization, and then take it as a step forward. Nothing in the composable world is a magic bullet for some other problem. I think a true assessment of your solution is always key.
A good road mapping session, and I will leave that there. Cam, thanks so much for the time, and I hope everyone enjoyed it and everyone enjoy your day.